2 degrees Celsius. This is the goal of the Paris Climate Agreement, to keep the average global temperature from warming more than 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels. It's been about 200 years since the Industrial Revolution. In that time, ever-increasing amounts of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere have helped heat the Earth more than halfway to that point. Let's take a closer look at the last 100 years. From 1920 to 1980, the global temperatures climbed about 0.4 of a degree Celsius. After 1980, that pace more than doubled. In just 40 years, the temperatures have climbed another 0.7 of a degree. In 3 of the last 5 years, temperatures have crossed the 1.2 degree mark. Last year, we reached 1.27 degrees Celsius above late 19th century temperatures. We're dangerously accelerating toward that 2 degrees. And this is only a global average. Many locations around the planet have seen temperatures soar to much higher levels. Large parts of Europe, Greenland, Alaska, and Russia, including Siberia, have already surpassed 2 degrees. And up north, above the Arctic Circle, the warming is over 4 degrees. That extra heat concentrated in the Arctic, well, that's causing a massive melt of polar ice, and it's only getting worse. On average, 14,000 tons of water melt from the Arctic every second. That's more than 4 times the amount of water that goes over Niagara Falls each second. If we stay on our course over the last 10 years, the Earth could hit the 2 degree mark as soon as 2040, and possibly up to 3 degrees by 2060. Only a significant reduction in carbon dioxide emissions quickly will make the Paris goal a reality. Climate scientists say surpassing that milestone will result in more frequent deadly heat waves, drought, and wildfires, making large areas of our planet uninhabitable. And sea levels are, quote, very likely to rise a foot by the end of the century and could rise by even as much as 8 feet. That will likely make hurricanes more powerful, specifically unleashing flooding connected with dangerous storm surges, impacting hundreds of millions of people who live in coastal areas. Our road to 2 degrees is shortening. The time to act? Now.
Climate change. It's real, it's serious, and it's up to us to solve it. In the last 2 decades, we've experienced 14 of the hottest 15 years on record. By 2050, drought and chronic water shortages could impact 1 billion people, while millions more will be at risk from coastal flooding. It can seem overwhelming, but there's reason for hope. If we embrace solar and wind power to their full potential, we can cut the world's yearly carbon emissions by 1/3. Already, Germany generates 27% of its electricity from renewables, with a goal of 80% by 2050. Denmark has shown it can produce more wind energy than it can use, and England is building the world's biggest offshore wind farm. Communities large and small are taking steps. A new public building in Mexico City has an exterior that breaks down air pollutants, erasing the effects of 1,000 cars each day. Paris installed street tiles that harvest energy from foot traffic. Other cities are paving streets with smog-eating concrete and sidewalks with recycled materials. Individuals can make a difference too, through the choices we make every day. If every American driver drove 10 miles less each week, it could eliminate more than 100 billion pounds of carbon from the air each year. New innovations are making important strides possible, and more are on the way, but we can't wait. Reimagining our world's energy future will take a shared sense of urgency from countries, companies, cities, and all of us. Working together, real change is possible. Learn more at natgeo.com/climate.
Welcome to our Kamayan para sa Kalikasan Forum. Allow me to walk you through our program today. We will begin with our Zoom etiquette, followed by an opening prayer and our Philippine National Anthem. Makakalikasang araw po! Let us invoke the presence of our Almighty God as Dr. Mayan Gonzaga leads us in the opening prayer.
Gandang hapon, mayong hapon po from PNU Visayas, Philippine Normal University Visayas. Halindri sa Cadiz City, Negros Occidental. Please allow me to read this prayer for the sustainability of Metro Manila. And I also invite everyone to follow alongside me. Almighty Father, we come before you today with hearts full of gratitude for the gift of life and the beauty of this earth entrusted to our care. Father God, we acknowledge the pressing challenge of overpopulation and rapid urban growth in our country, especially in Metro Manila. Help us to grasp the complexities of this issue and lead us towards sustainable solutions. Lord, we lift up Metro Manila and its people to you. Inspire our leaders to craft policies that harmonize development with environmental stewardship. Grant them wisdom and courage to enact these policies for the welfare of all residents and the conservation of our natural resources. Almighty God, instill in us a deep compassion for the most vulnerable among us, the poor and destitute who bear the brunt of unsustainable practices. May we act with urgency and responsibility, recognizing our interconnectedness with one another and with the environment. Grant wisdom to our experts this afternoon, O Lord, and illuminate our hearts with your light, that we may comprehend and embrace effective solutions that promote harmony with nature. May this meeting empower us to make positive changes in both our personal lives and our communities, and contribute to a sustainable and just future for all. We offer this prayer in the name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Bayang magiliw, dalas ng silanganan, alab ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, duyan ka ng magiting, sa manlulupig, di ka pasisigit. Sa dagat at bundok, sa simoy at sa langit mong baghaw, may dilagang tula at awit sa paglayang minamahal. Ang kislap ng watawat mo'y tagumpay na nagniningning. Ang bituin at araw niya kailan pa may di magdidilim. Lupa ng araw ng walhatit pagsinta, buhay langit sa piling mo. Aming ligaya na pag may mga api, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Good afternoon po. Isang mainit, masaya at makakalikasang pagbati sa inyong lahat. Welcome once again to Kamayan para sa Kalikasan Forum, a regular event held every third Friday of each month since 1990. This is episode number 408, brought to you by Green Convergence for Safe Food, Healthy Environment, and Sustainable Economy, or GC for short, and Kamayan Restaurant. This particular episode on Metro Manila's carrying capacity is co-organized with GC's member organization, Partnership for Clean Air. We are currently live streaming at the Green Convergence Facebook page, and a video recording will later be uploaded to the GC website and the GC YouTube channel. I am your moderator, Marie Marciano, a founding director and former vice president of GC, former president of Salika and Mother Earth Foundation, former executive director of Bantay Kalikasan, and a lifetime worker, advocate, and volunteer of many causes and organizations, particularly for environmental protection, justice, and human rights. And now it's time to welcome our co-moderator, who has been another longtime Earth defender since his high school days. He is the host of Boses ng Kalikasan and is a member of the Board of Trustees of Green Convergence. At the same time, he is president of the Green Party of the Philippines and vice president of Bayanihan para sa Kalikasan Movement, Inc., as well as a content creator and influencer. Take it away, David D'Angelo. Hi,
Yes,
David.
mga kalikasang araw po sa inyong lahat. At maraming salamat, Miss Marie, no, sa ating napaka-interesting na discussion today. Ang question na ating sasagutin, has Metro Manila reached its carrying capacity? Siyempre,
Right.
interesting yan kasi kahit ako gusto ko malaman narating na ba natin o baka sobra-sobra na tayo? Very interesting topic.
Yung iba nga, hindi nila alam kung anong ibig sabihin ng carrying capacity,
yun
di ba?
nga. Ano ba yung carrying capacity na yan? Baka mamaya sa sobrang bigat pala, ganun ba yan? Sobrang bigat ng Metro Manila, lumulubog na ba tayo? So, very interesting to know for today.
Sobrang bigat at sobrang sikip.
Yes.
Okay. So, are we ready to move on?
Let's go.
Wala ka na bang ibang mga komentaryo pa?
Wala ba? Kasi interested ako malaman doon sa ating mga speakers tungkol sa topic na ito Kung
Okay,
what is
so
carrying capacity?
Yeah.
What should we, view with Metro Manila? Ano ba to? So very interesting talaga. Also,
that's true. So stick around, guys. To kickstart today's forum, we have someone who has been an active environmental advocate for many years. She is a Maryknoll missionary who represented her congregation in talks on climate change in the United Nations. Currently, she is the executive director of the Environmental Studies Institute of Miriam College and the vice president of Green Convergence. Sister Marvy Misolas.
Thank you.
Good morning, sister.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon nga pala.
And to all of us, and welcome for this session of Kamayan. I'm so happy that you took this topic, to really highlight them. So I think we'll begin with maybe asking, what is the carrying capacity in sustainable terms? As it is, sustainable carrying capacity has a simple definition from an ecological perspective. It says that it is the number of people and other species that can be supported in a particular area indefinitely, given that the area's endowment of water, food, and other necessities. Very interesting, because we also talk about the integrity of creation, one of the core values of Miriam College. And I think integrity of creation is very much connected with the carrying capacity, so that one area can sustain life. So it says that a human breathes out 9.5 tons of air in a year, but oxygen only makes up about 23% of that air by mass, and we only extract a little over a third of the oxygen from one breath. That works out to a total of about 750 kilogram of oxygen per year, which is very roughly 7 or 8 trees worth. Wow, ganun pala yun. 7 o 8 trees. We will also look at the current ratio of Metro Manila population. According to this report, in 2024, this year, we have about 14,942,000, almost 15 million now. It's a 1.87 increase from the 2023 numbers, which is 14,667,000. Again, it's a 1.81 increase from the previous year. The 2022 was 14,406,000, which is a 1.74 increase from 2021. So we could rightly say that the average increase of population in Metro Manila would be about 1.80, 1.8. so it will continue to increase, no? As we go along. So what about the land area of Metro Manila and its cities? So Metro Manila, the national capital region of the Philippines, is the seat government of the most populous region of the Philippines. It covers an area of more than 636 square kilometers and is composed of City of Manila and 16 local government units and 1 municipality. As of now, Metro Manila has a total public road of 3,091.3 kilometers, comprising the following: National Road, City Road, Municipal Road, and Barangay Road that totals 907.5 kilometers. So we with a given land of the total length of road work, how does actually one fit in all nearly 15 million? All the motorized vehicles, including Metro Manilans, people and vehicles that are compelled by economic forces on a day-to-day basis, no? Sabi nga dito sa isang ABS-CBN news, ang Metro Manila has exceeded its capacity. Ang volume ng sasakyan, kasi ang EDSA is 400,000 na ang cars daily, and the carrying capacity is only 300,000. So we're overshoot, no? So we're trying to fit 3.6 million vehicles in a 5,000 kilometers road. So the 2023 record sales of cars is about 429,800. No, so you just sum up those figures, and we know that we are over our carrying capacity. No? So sit and relax, and later on interact with us as we listen to our esteemed speakers this afternoon. So Marie, I give back to you the mic. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Sister Marvy, for setting the tone of today's forum. It's really going to be one very interesting, stimulating discussion. Moving on, just so we're all in the same page, allow me to give you a brief rundown of the program flow. It's really simple. It has two major parts. Part one consists of the speakers' presentations to be given without interruptions, meaning without questions and answers. And part two is the open forum, where you can then address your questions to any of the resource speakers. Since questions will not be entertained during part one, it is advisable to write down your questions if you don't trust your memory, like me. Part two is the open forum. Here you can ask your questions to be answered directly by the resource speakers. David, I believe you have something to add?
Yes, Miss Marie. Good afternoon again to everyone. And before we start, I think we would like to thank everyone in advance, to all those who are attending today, from the government, the academe, students, and of course non-government organizations are also part of the Kamayan para sa Kalikasan forum for today. A very brief guidelines for everyone. Number one is to avoid distracting ambient noise. All participants are requested to keep your microphone on mute for the duration of the webinar, except during the open forum, when participants are welcome to speak and ask questions. Meantime, you may use the chat box for comments, reactions, or messages.
That's it?
Yeah, that's it.
Okay. Thanks for those reminders, David. So now we're all set to introduce our first speaker. Yay! We're happy to have with us today a well-known leader in the environmental movement. He studied at German Culture and Language, Goethe Institute, Manila, and Germany. A BS Biology graduate at St. Louis University, Baguio City. Uy! Pareho pala tayo, Rene. I was also at St. Louis for a while. Public relations and shared value consultant from 1999 to present. Currently, he is the president of Partnership for Clean Air, or PCA, Concerned Citizens Against Pollution, COCAP, Consumer Rights for Safe Food, dami, no? And co-chair of the NCR Airshed. Yes, please give a warm welcome to Rene Pineda. Hello, Rene. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Marie. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for your very kind introduction. Well, the very nagging question and the very technical question, or a very more pressing question, has Metro Manila exceeded its carrying capacity? Marie has opened the discussion by saying, what is carrying capacity? In our earlier discussion, we were really struggling how to laymanize this very technical term, and some may not understand it. Some may think, like David DeAngelo said, is Metro Manila heavy and it's sinking? Is it carrying capacity per se? Is it something that is equated with weight or equated with what? We don't know. So Marie has given a very good a very good comparison, or a very good idea about it. It's like what she said. It's like owning a small room wherein a family lives in this room, but this family keeps on acquiring a lot of furnitures, a lot of gadgets, until finally the family has to just stand up and do nothing but stand up in the room to live. So that's how carrying capacity is being equated in layman's term. For also disclosure, the picture on the left, the very densely densely populated area, is a aerial picture somewhere in Pasig. And the picture on the right is a heavy traffic scenario along Commonwealth Avenue. These are what, 5 to 7 year old pictures. So just to disclose that these are not pictures lifted from Google that represent other areas or represent the foreign countries that just like others do, no? But these are real photos from, this one is Pasig, and the other one is Commonwealth in Quezon City. So you can imagine how much we want to mirror what carrying capacity could mean to us. So what is carrying capacity? That's like what I elucidated and made a layman's term. I would like to borrow what Sister Marvy has shared with you, and we'd like to share with you what the scientist has defined carrying capacity. It says, carrying capacity, the sustainable carrying capacity has a simple definition from an ecological perspective. It is the number of people and other species that can be supported to live in a particular area, in this case, the Metro Manila, indefinitely, given that area's endowment of water, food, and other necessities. Let us try to remember the word sustainable and indefinitely, an endowment of water, food, and other necessities. And you be the judge, and you be the testament to whether or not Metro Manila is still sustainably performing its carrying capacity. Gone are the days where water can be drawn from streams in Metro Manila, from brooks, from deep wells. Gone are the days when food are available in the rivers, in the bay, in the fields of San Juan and Makati, which used to be plain field for rice and other necessities. Gone are these days. All the endowments of Metro Manila for water and food are gone. We import our food by having to drown many barangays of Bulacan and a plan to drown many barangays in Quezon and Tanay just to augment the water supply of Metro Manila. We are not talking here even of whether or not water is still not available or water is still not enough for Metro Manila. We still have to equate how Metro Manilans squander water with many golf courses, with many malls, with many hotels, with many restaurants, with many lawns, with many golf courses, etc., etc. And this has caused a long and wide variety of problem, because water is also a necessity in those areas where we get it from. So the loss of our endowment of our natural water in Metro Manila has made it unsustainable. For food, our food in Metro Manila is almost 100% imported per se, meaning it comes from other places outside of Metro Manila. And when there is calamity and we are locked, we have scarcity and insecure food situation. And that's the reason for a very long carbon footprint and very heavy carbon footprint for the source of food, the source of water. So gone were the days when we can just pick up our food from our backyards, from our neighbors, from the forests, from the gardens. This is no longer the fact. The fact is, when you cannot compete with the requirements of the economic pressure brought about by the loss of carrying capacity, then life becomes unsustainable in an area like Metro Manila. So the loss of an endowment of water, food, and other necessities becomes the criteria for the determination whether an area can still carry the capacity of sustainable life by its citizens. So what are the another vital necessity is air. And I'd like to borrow what the Sister Marby also has shared. No? And other than food and water, a human breathes about 9.5 tons of air in a year, but oxygen only makes up about 23% of that air by mass. And we only extract a little over a third of the oxygen from each breath, meaning the air available in the atmosphere, we are only able to draw 20%, 23% of oxygen from that air. And that works out a total of about 740 kilograms of oxygen per year. But we need 9.5 tons, which is very roughly 7 to 8 trees worth. Goes to say, we need 7 to 8 trees available in an area to be able to breathe oxygen. Remember that, because we will question ourselves, are there 7 or 8 trees available per capita in Metro Manila? We will find out later. So let's do the math. The current Metro Manila population of Manila in 2024 is 14.9 million, nearly 15 million, as was elucidated by Sister Marby. And Metro Manila, the National Capital Region, has more than 633 square kilometers or 636 billion square meters of land area. Metro Manila has a total public road length of 3,091 kilometers length, comprising of the following: National Road, 907.5 kilometers, City Road, 1,282 kilometers, Municipal Road, 583.1 kilometers, and Barangay Road, 318.7 kilometers. Let's do some assumptions. A total of 3,091.3 kilometers length multiplied by 1,000 meters, which is a kilometer, multiplied by 12 meters, that is the assumption of the width of the roads. That's a very generous assumption and very minimal assumption, owing that EDSA is 54 meters. That's why it's called Highway 54. Commonwealth is much wider than EDSA. It's around 70 meters wide, etc., etc. Ross Boulevard is around 18 meters or to 20 meters wide. So we assume 12, covering the other roads and covering municipal roads and barangay roads, assuming these are all averaging 12 meters. That would amount to 37,095,600 square meters is the total area of roads. You deduct that area from the total land area of Metro Manila, that is quite a huge amount. Not including the areas dedicated to houses, buildings, offices, malls, golf courses, and what have you. The roads alone comprise a huge chunk of the total area of Metro Manila. Now comes the other necessity part, the air. We are assuming we must have 8 trees around us in order to breathe wonderful and pure oxygen. We multiply that currently by 15 million people and 12 square meters for one tree to blossom and to grow properly. That equates to 120 million trees planted in 1.44 billion square meters of land. Is that available in Metro Manila? Maybe we have 1 million trees here and there, but maybe even less. But 120 million trees for 15 million people. Again, let's go back to the assumption 15 million people are the registered and the surveyed population of Metro Manila. But Metro Manila becomes 25 million during daytime because of migration from other areas coming into Metro Manila to transact their daily livelihood, to transact business, to transact livelihood, to transact anything. Metro Manila becomes 25 million. So, how many trees do we need for the 15 million? 120 million. But if we are invaded by another 20 million or another 10 million during the day, we need more 120 million trees to allocate oxygen for the other guests of Metro Manila. Now, we are saying here, what are the necessary measures in order to expand carrying capacity? Our planners have made flyovers, have made bridges. Now they're planning to make a flyover on top of our Pasig River. Now they want to reclaim area along the bay, in Manila Bay, in order to expand the economic activity and economic boom of Metro Manila. It all boils down to exceeding the carrying capacity again, because these are all magnet for influx of more people, influx of more activities, influx of degradation of the carrying capacity. So the mere fact that we can at one given point ease the traffic for 1 minute, but after that's 1 minute, it will go back and revert back to a very serious problem. We were all experiencing that when we were campaigning in fighting the national government in along the Katipunan Road, wherein they wanted to widen the Katipunan Road, and along with it goes the knocking down of all the trees in the middle and on the sides. And we were confronted with arguments like, for the sake of traffic easement and for betterment, etc., you need to agree because this is for the future. If only now we experience the horrendous and worst traffic condition after Katipunan has been widened. The same is true with EDSA. The same is true with Commonwealth. Its widening didn't give any relief for the traffic. For so long as the lure for more activities in a given area with its losing endowment for vital necessities has been violated. So our calculations state that Metro Manila has long exceeded its carrying capacity. Very long time ago. What? 20 years? 30 years? So what do experts say? Let's hear it from the expert. Paribet, ayaw ng double click ito. Ayan na. So in an interview by ABS-CBN POPCOM Executive Director Dr. Juan Antonio Perez III stressed that urban congestion in Metro Manila is caused by internal migration, and the solution to the problem is not limited to Metro Manila alone. The lack of development in nearby provinces encourages Filipinos to migrate. Thus, regional development should focus on giving more opportunities in the province to avoid congestion due to migration. Dr. Perez concluded.
Traffic, araw man o gabi, pangunahing kalsada man o mabuhay lane, ito ang madalas na reklamo ngayon sa National Capital Region. Sabi nga ng navigation app na Waze, worst traffic on Earth. Ayon naman sa Japanese International Cooperation Agency, 2.4 billion pesos araw-araw ang halaga ng pinsala ng traffic sa bansa. Para naman sa Senior Advisor ng American Chamber of Commerce of the Philippines, baka maging uninhabitable o hindi na matirhan ng Metro Manila pagdating ng 2020 kung hindi ma-upgrade at maayos ang mga kalsada at infrastruktura kasabay ng paglago ng automotive industry sa bansa. Pero hindi lang sasakyan ang nagpapasikip sa rehiyon. Ayon sa Commission on Population o POPCOM, marami pa rin mga taga-karatig probinsya ang nagsisilipatan sa Metro Manila at Calabarzon dahil sa mga lugar na ito nakikita ang pag-asenso. Sa tansya ng POPCOM, 3 sa bawat 4 na Pilipinong pumupunta sa urban centers ang nagtatagumpay. Pero may isa na hindi nakakahanap ng trabaho o nakakapundar.
Actually, here in Metro Manila, the birth rate is not that high anymore. Metro Manila is growing because of migration into Metro Manila and also into Calabarzon.
Para sa POPCOM, hindi lang Metro Manila ang dapat tinitingnan sa pagresolba sa congestion, kundi ang buong bansa.
That might be something we want to develop in the different regions. So it's important for the regional development committees, for example, to think about increasing opportunities in the region. So internal migration does not lead to urban congestion.
Humihingi naman ng pag-unawa ang palasyo.
Meron tayong nakalatag na master plan na pangmatagalan. Sakop nito ang hindi lamang ang Metro Manila, kundi Calabarzon at Central Luzon.
Sa ngayon, hintay-hintay muna sa solusyon ng gobyerno. Nalagay ng traffic ngayon sa Metro Manila, nasanay na mga Pilipino sa paghihintay. Jeff Canoy, ABS-CBN News.
Okay, let's now take a look at how our Asian neighbors got to confront their carrying capacities issue. And let's not look any far. Let's look at Asia. Let's examine how bad was the congestion in Seoul in the 1980s. The picture below depicts the traffic congestion, how terrible the traffic congestion is in Seoul during the 1980s, especially so just right after the Korean War in the 1950s. The Korean economy was needing its boost in the arm and got wine with economic wonder, and now it's a giant, and alongside with it is the problem of congestion and heavy traffic in its capital, Seoul. But look at how they confronted the worsening traffic beginning in the 1970s, 80s, 90s, until the early 2000s. So how does the neighbor South Korea cope with carrying capacity problem? This is a blog by a famous blogger, a traveler. Seoul tears down an urban highway and the city can breathe again, it says. This downtown green space in Seoul was once a looming, congested, elevated freeway. Photo by Kyle Nishioka, posted from Sightline's Daily Score blog. A sustainability-loving transportation planner, I was thrilled to learn that Dr. Kiyon Huang would be visiting Vancouver and talking about the project that had made Seoul, Korea, a legend in urban planning circles. Dr. Kiyon Huang was an officer of Seoul City. So how did Seoul do it? High-volume expressways were a symbol of economic progress after the Korean War in South Korea. In Seoul, progress came with an ecological cost. In 1968, an elevated freeway covered up the Cheonggye Creek, which ran through a rapidly urbanizing zone, hiding the features of its historical waterfront. As the economy thrived, cars filled up the expressway. Just 3 decades later, the surrounding Cheonggye area recorded highest levels of noise and congestion in the city. An idea rose up from an unlikely source and residents agreed. The situation could not be improved without removing the freeway. Does this sound familiar? An expressway on top of a river, an expressway in Seoul on top of a creek or on top of a water body, natural water body. It's very relevant in our context, no? The Pasig River. So following this move by the officers and by the officials of the Seoul city, 15 more expressways in Seoul have been demolished. This is their way to deal with carrying capacity issues, away with sources of congestion, do away with roads that lead to more carrying capacity violation and carrying capacity exceedance. It is still, Seoul is still thriving without the 15 more expressway. And Seoul has, tourism has quadrupled, even if there are no expressways to ferry tourists and even its citizens. It's working. So may we copy this Korean model. So, for lack of a visionary leader like in Seoul, what can we do here in Metro Manila? Number one, I'm sure our other guests would bail me out on this one and would corroborate me on this one. Demand for open space, which by definition of law is beyond the commerce of man. Amendment of Section 31 of Presidential Decree number 957. This is Presidential Decree of the then Ferdinand Marcos Sr. The amendment requires subdivision and condominium developers to provide adequate roads, alleys, and sidewalks in their projects, reservation of open space. Subdivision projects with an area of 1 hectare or more must reserve 30% of the gross area for open space. Number two, demand for the declaration of attainment and non-attainment areas. Republic Act 8749 or the Clean Air Act mandates the DNR to declare areas as attainment and non-attainment. This means that areas that have exceeded the levels of air emissions as provided for by law will have to be declared as non-attainment areas. These areas are then compelled to reduce emissions with actionable projects until they revert to attainment areas. And number three, and the most important of all, demand and seek for a declarative relief. Section 16, Article 2 of the 1987 Constitution explicitly provides, and I quote, "The state shall protect and advance the right of the people to a balanced and healthful ecology in accord with the rhythm and harmony of nature." The mere fact that we ourselves violate our oath to exceed our carrying capacity, but it boils down to governance. If government has a different view of how development should be, then we should be able to remind them of this very solemn, enshrined in the Constitution mandate to protect and advance the right of the people to a balanced and healthful ecology in accord with the rhythm and harmony of nature. The loss of our endowment for food and water and other vital necessity as air is a violation of this very solemn constitutional right. And there are already a number of jurisprudence promulgated by the Supreme Court upholding this very beautiful constitutional right, one of which is the Oposa Doctrine. Oposa, our attorney Tony Oposa, our colleague in the environment movement, has sued the national government to stop the continuation of logging in an area to the detriment of the future children yet unborn, because it will deprive them of their right to a balanced and healthful ecology in accord with the rhythm and harmony of nature. Tony Oposa won, even including his continuing mandamus of the Manila Bay issue. So this is a very powerful provision of the Constitution that we should always arm ourselves and remind ourselves and remind our co-worker in the government, please take a look at your mandate and our mandate and be reminded that we cannot just treat our development with advancement in the economy, more GDP, more of this, more of that, more of this, but less of the quality of life. So this is a very powerful tool, and this is something that we'd like to toss into our discussion in order that we can couple it with other actionable items in our agenda. So may God bless the Philippines, and thank you so much for the opportunity.
It was really a question I was contemplating with the 30% requirement for the subdivisions and everything, which was not being done. And the thing about open spaces is still debatable. They're actually open spaces without trees, some of them. So literal open spaces.
I was thanking Rene for his very enlightening presentation. I mean, there are so many things we have to think about. It's really mind-boggling.
A lot of questions as well, I think, for later on, especially the provision on the Constitution.
Yes,
it's in the Constitution, but there's
important.
A lot being violated on that provision of the Constitution.
Yeah.
Okay, later on, I guess we will have more questions on that. But for now, let us go to our next speaker. Again, thanks, Sir Rene Pineda, the President of Partnership for Clean Air. Maraming salamat po for that enlightening discussion. Our next speaker, he has over 20 years experience in the environment sector, having contributed her technical expertise and air quality research and monitoring through her chemistry and environmental science background. She has a doctorate in environmental science and engineering, air quality, from the Gwangju Institute of Science and Technology, or GIST, in South Korea. She holds a master's in environmental science, water and air quality from the University of the Philippines, Diliman, and a bachelor in chemistry, also from UP Diliman. She has authored and co-authored for various scientific journals, studies, and publications on air quality research and management. To talk about warming potential of traffic emissions in Metro Manila, please welcome the Deputy Director, UP Institute of Environmental Science and Meteorology and Vice President of Partnership for Clean Air, Mylene G. Cayetano, PhD.
Good afternoon po, everyone. Thank you, Green Convergence, for inviting me here in the 400 plus episode. So, ano po pala, high school pa lang po ako meron ng ganito Kamayan Forum, and I'm happy na naging part ako nitong forum na to. Thank you for inviting me, and congratulations in advance, Ma'am Tessa, dito sa event. So, medyo disclaimer lang po. I hope hindi, my objective here is to laymanize the research output of one of our masters in meteorology student, in which I am the advisor. His name is Kyle Ilagan. So this is from our research entitled The Warming Potential of Black Carbon in Metro Manila, Philippines. So my objective is to laymanize the outputs of the research, because I believe that it is important that as Metro Manila residents, we need to know what are the impacts of our activities in the warming that we are experiencing in recent years, especially when we had the pandemic, before the pandemic, and then during the pandemic. These are the scope of the study. So let me just have a quick check. Am I audible clearly?
Yes.
Okay, sige. So i-walk through natin ang bawat topic in the most laymanized way that I can as possible. So climate change, this is already a fact established since scientists already has established the evidences that climate change is indeed happening, and we are experiencing global temperature increase by as much as 1.1 degrees C from 1901 to 2020. And because of this sea level rise has accelerated from 1.7 millimeters per year to 3.2 millimeters per year since 1993. And then there are news that the glaciers are already melting, and these are also established facts. And there are evidences and video footages that the glaciers are already melting, and Greenland, nagre-recede na yung glacier line sa Greenland, sa North Pole. And then the more popular indicator of climate change is the carbon dioxide or CO2. This is man-made CO2 because we believe naman na during respiration of plants, there are natural carbon dioxide emitted by trees, by plants. But when we talk of the human impacts of climate change, we're talking of the man-made, human-induced parameter of climate change, which is the man-made emissions of carbon dioxide or CO2 in the atmosphere. It increased by 25% and 40% since 1958. And during and this was originally the increase happened during the onset of the Industrial Revolution in the 1800s. So indeed, human-induced carbon dioxide is being blamed as the most abundant cause of climate change. But CO2 is a gas, okay? And then there is black carbon. So carbon dioxide, gas ito, and then there is black carbon, and that is the focus of our study. And black carbon is a pollutant. But before going through to black carbon, gusto ko muna ma-establish, so CO2 is a gas, black carbon is a pollutant, no, and it's in a solid form. So yung warming trend din ng mundo, umiinit na tayo. Umiinit na yung mundo. Ay, sorry, nandito pa rin camera ko yan. So, the global temperature is also increasing. Since the 1980s, we are experiencing a warming trend of 1.5. Nasa 1.5 pathway na tayo if we will not control global warming. Okay. So, at 1.1 degrees centigrade. You see it moving? So, kung wala pa rin control na mangyayari, pupunta na tayo sa increase na 2.0. And these are very alarming because when we experience increase in temperature, may feedback mechanism yon. So, even a slight increase in the average temperature because of the human impacts, we can experience higher temperatures, of course, that can worsen storms, that can produce heat waves, floods, and droughts. Diba nitong nakaraang dry season, na-experience na natin yung heat wave with the heat index na nagkukos na ng sobrang init sa paligid na nagka-cancel na ng classes, may mga teachers na na-stroke because of high heat index. And that's a manifestation of climate change. And dito yon sa Pilipinas, no? Sa ibang bansa rin, it's being experienced. So kami, as scientists, we are able to measure the heat due to pollution. And this is the overall conceptual framework of the study. So ang inaral ng study ay itong heat na na-absorb. So naturally kasi yung araw, kapag may sikat yung araw, yung sikat ng araw ay pumupunta sa loob ng mundo. Tumatama sa kalupaan. Ilang porsyento ang lumalabas? Halos nasa more than 40% yung lumalabas sa space. 51% ay na-absorb ng kalupaan. 3% na absorb ng mga ulap, 7% ay napupunta sa hangin, 16% ay nananatili lang sa hangin at inaasahan natin na around 64% dapat lalabas yung init. Pero dahil may pollution, merong black carbon sa hangin, anong nangyayari? Hindi nakakalabas lahat ng init na galing sa araw. At yun yung warming potential. And ano ang pollution sa Metro Manila na nakakapag-trap ng init galing sa araw upang maranasan natin ito bilang warming potential or bilang init? Hawak ko ngayon ay dalawang klase ng filter. Nandito sa kaliwang kamay ko ay puti na filter, papel, no? So yung puti, ito yung hindi pa namin inilalabas itong filter. Ngayon, yung pangalawang filter ay filter na in-expose sa labas, sa roadside, matapos ang 24 oras. At ang paghigop ng hangin dito sa filter or yung pag-sample sa filter ay katulad ng paghinga ng ating katawan. Ganun yung flow ng hangin. So makalipas ang 24 oras, naging ganito na ka-dark or kaitim yung filter na aming in-expose sa labas. At itong itim na to ay ang black carbon. Ito ay manifestation ng pollution na galing sa mga sasakyan. Okay, so that's black carbon. Okay, so ang black carbon ay galing sa mga bagay na nasusunog at galing din ito sa combustion engines, lalong-lalo na sa combustion ng fossil fuels. And alam natin na sa city, sa Metro Manila or sa mga syudad, talamakang mga sasakyan at kung hindi maayos ang preventive maintenance, kung hindi alaga ang sasakyan, maitim yung usok na nakikita natin sa mga tambucho. And yon definitely ay black carbon, BC. Ang black carbon ay short-lived, ibig sabihin panandalian lang itong nasa hangin. Ito ay second largest contributor sa global warming. At sa Metro Manila, galing ito sa mga internal combustion engines o mga sasakyan. Ano pa ba? Ito ay, ang kanyang source ay galing mismo sa primary, no? Sa mga sasakyan. Primary source. Maaring galing din ito sa pagsisiga at maaring galing din sa mga industrial area. So sa pag-aaral namin, ang aming focus ng study ay sa roadside or sa ambient roadside. Again, ano ang effect ng BC or black carbon? Nakakapagpalala ito ng init na nararamdaman natin sa paligid o yung heat index maaring tumaas because of black carbon sa hangin. Ayun nga, globally, natatransport ito from one place to another, even sa mga malilinis na lugar dahil sa napakaliit nito, madali siyang madala ng hangin. So napupunta siya sa North Pole, sa South Pole, sa Greenland, sa Antarctica, at nakakapagdulot ito ng pagkatunaw, mabilis ang pagtunaw ng mga glacier. At syempre, component din siya ng mga haze na nararanasan natin, manifestation ng air pollution. Sa study na ginawa namin dito sa UP, ito yung mga katanungan. How does the black carbon vary during the pandemic and before the pandemic? Dahil naniniwala kami na ang pandemic period ay yung panahon kung kailan wala halos sasakyan sa kalsada. So, maaari naming mapag-aralan kung ano ang level ng air quality kapag walang sasakyan. So, we are able to compare the pandemic and the pre-pandemic, which is the clean, relatively clean, and the polluted period sa Metro Manila. And then, inaral din namin kung ano ang pagkakaiba ng black carbon levels sa mga sampling site na aming inaral. With credits to the DNR-EMB Central Office ang mga filters na ginamit po namin ay galing sa regulatory agency natin. And then, once na malaman na namin kung ano yung pagkakaiba ng level ng black carbon sa roadside, tsaka sa general ambient, pati na rin sa pandemic at pre-pandemic, ano naman yung warming potential na idinudulot nitong pollution na to. So, we want to raise awareness on the warming potential ng black carbon sa Metro Manila. Okay, so ang indicator ng warming potential ay tinatawag na upwelling irradiance. So medyo scientific term lang, pero once na makita ninyo yung upwelling irradiance, ito yung ginamit naming parameter para masabi na, para malaman ang warming potential o yung init factor ng na dulot ng black carbon sa Metro Manila. Okay, gumamit kami ng marami pang mga parameters katulad ng cloud height dahil gusto namin malaman ano yung, kumbaga, kapag may ulap sa paligid, kasi nag-a-act yung ulap na parang bubong, natatrap niya yung init. So malalaman namin hanggang saan yung bubong ng atmosphere para mas masukat namin yung warming potential. So sa aming pag-aaral, bago kami mag-umpisa, ganito yung aming inaasahan na resulta. Pag mataas yung black carbon concentration, mataas din yung absorption ng energy dito sa kalupaan. So kung mataas yung black carbon, maraming energy na ma-absorb, ibig sabihin mas mainit yung mararamdaman natin. Mas mataas yung warming potential. Pero dahil nag-pandemic, na-reduce yung human activities, nabawasan ng sasakyan sa kalsada, halos wala na nga, inaasahan namin sa resulta na yung 2020 data ay magdudulot ng low black carbon concentration at less warming potential. So yun yung tinest namin dito sa study. The following sites are considered. So 4 na roadside ambient stations ng DNR, EMB, NCR, which are DOH site, Marikina, MMDA, MMDA and NPO, at isang general ambient station which is Muntinlupa. Gumamit kami ng multi-wavelength absorption black carbon instrument or MABI para malaman yung level ng black carbon. Gumamit din kami ng mga models at ng mga data para malaman yung cloud base, pati na rin yung cloud top, which are input sa aming mga model. So imagine lang natin, kailangan kasi sa data analysis kung hanggang saan yung kisame ng atmosphere para malaman natin kung gaano karami yung warming potential, yung upwelling irradiance, therefore interpreted as warming potential. Okay, so ito yung mga resulta. Pinapakita lang dito yung level ng black carbon sa mga sites na aming in-study. So these are sites from NPO, Marikina, and Muntinlupa. At mapapansin natin yung 2020 concentrations, bumaba siya. So katulad ng aming inaasahan, dahil nabawasan ng sasakyan sa kalsada, bumaba yung black carbon concentration during the pandemic. Ayan. So may mga tinuturo kami ng mga episodes kung saan mas nagpapababa yung level ng concentration during the pandemic period kumpara sa pandemic, pre-pandemic period. And then, ito naman ay pinapakita yung pinagkumpara namin yung taon ng pag-aaral sa DOH station sa Manila, Taft Avenue, noong 2016 at 2020. So, consistently bumaba yung level ng black carbon noong pandemic period kumpara nung pre-pandemic period. Ganito rin yung NPO station which is along EDSA sa Quezon City. Nakakaranas ito ng mataas na level ng black carbon noong pre-pandemic. Pero tingnan nyo itong kulay gray yun 2014, 2016. Pero nung pandemic period, ang laki ng ibinaba ng level ng black carbon sa EDSA. Ganun din ang level ng black carbon sa Muntinlupa, yung kulay pula. No? bumaba rin yung level ng black carbon. At ito, pinapakita namin dito na may statistical basis para sabihin na ang Muntinlupa ay isang general ambient site kumpara sa ibang site na roadside site. So pwede natin gamitin yung black carbon concentration sa Muntinlupa para basihan, para malaman natin kung may warming potential ang ating mga lugar na inaral. We compare it with Muntinlupa bilang general ambient site. So we compare the roadside and general ambient site. So again, upwelling irradiance ay ibig sabihin lang nito pagka na-measure na namin yung upwelling irradiance, and then this will tell about the warming potential, and we're able to do that. So pinapakita rito yung variations ng upwelling irradiance na na-measure namin, at ito yung resulta. So, sa mga stations, pinagkumpara namin, pre-pandemic, ang black carbon concentration sa NPO, Marikina, sa EDSA, Quezon City, sa Marikina at sa Taft Avenue, Manila, tumaas ng 142% kumpara sa Muntinlupa, no? So yung black carbon concentration kumpara sa Muntinlupa, which is considered as general ambient o yung mas malinis or non-roadside. So mas mataas yung mga roadside na stations pagdating sa black carbon concentration. Mataas ng 142% ang NPO kumpara sa Muntinlupa. Ang Marikina Station naman mas mataas ng 190% kumpara sa Muntinlupa. At ang Taft Avenue Station ay 227% na mas mataas kumpara sa Muntinlupa Station. So dito pa lang ma-infer na natin na mas maraming sasakyan, mas mataas ang black carbon concentration. And these are pre-pandemic period. And paano naman yung kanyang warming potential? So a more negative upwelling irradiance, mas maraming heat yung natatrap. Ibig sabihin, mas mataas yung warming potential due to black carbon dito sa mga roadside sites noong bago mag-pandemic. Pero tingnan natin, nung pandemic na at nawalan at nabawasan ang sasakyan sa kalsada, ano naman ang nangyari sa upwelling irradiance at sa black carbon concentration? So nabawasan din yung black carbon concentration kumpara sa general ambient site. Sa Quezon City, EDSA, nabawasan siya kanina, it's around ilan ba? 142. Well, because this is compared sa Muntinlupa, no? Pero ang titignan natin dito yung upwelling irradiance. Kumpara sa upwelling irradiance o yung warming potential nung pre-pandemic period, mas bumaba yung warming potential ng mga measurement site during the pandemic. So, ibig sabihin, mas nabawasan yung init factor dahil nabawasan yung black carbon level sa hangin ng Metro Manila. Okay? So, ito rin, sinasabi nga na kumpara naman, pag pinagkumpara yung warming potential ng pre-pandemic versus pre-pandemic, so mas ang sabi dito, more negative ay more warming potential. So mas mataas yung warming potential sa Taft Avenue kumpara sa Marikina Station. Pumapangatlo yung sa NPO at pinakahuli ay sa Muntinlupa. Ibig sabihin kung ita-translate natin ito sa init factor, kapag maraming sasakyan sa mga site na ito sa Metro Manila, sa Taft, NPO, Marikina at Muntinlupa, mas mainit ang pakiramdam sa Manila, Taft Avenue. Susunod na mas mainit ay sa Marikina, kasunod ay sa EDSA, sa Quezon City, at ang pinaka less ang warming potential ay sa Muntinlupa. At yan ay dahil sa level ng black carbon. So anong take-home message dito? Yung black carbon mula sa roadside site ay mas mataas kaysa sa black carbon sa general ambient site sa Metro Manila. At isa pang take-home message ay if we reduce, kapag binawasan natin yung concentration ng black carbon, maaaring mabawasan din yung warming potential or yung init factor na nararanasan natin sa Metro Manila. That's it. I acknowledge my student, Kyle Ilagan, and also the Partnership for Clean Air. In fact, this is also a part of the project of PCA alongside with the source apportionment study, and syempre yung DNR-EMB for providing the filter collaterals. Thank you very much. Back to you, host.
Thank you. Thank you so very much.
Marami tayo natutulan doon, eh?
Oo.
Black carbon.
Pero very obvious yung warming, di ba? Hindi na ako makahinga sa init dito sa Manila.
Pero I'm surprised that Muntinlupa is general ambient site, meaning mas mababa yung concentration of black carbon.
Yeah, that's right. I wonder why, no?
Siguro less vehicles din sa metro, sa Muntinlupa area dahil dumadami pagdating ng Manila and EDSA.
Well, actually, because the site was inside the Bilibid prison.
Kaya pala.
Ano po? Yes, it is classified as a general ambience.
Oo nga.
Reference.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Mylene, for your very, ang tawag dito, mind-boggling.
Nice the study, ano?
Pero talaga yung awareness natin sa black carbon, all that, that's very eye-opening. No? So next, we will listen to insights into maintaining carrying capacity from our third speaker, who is an architect and an assistant professor at the University of the Philippines. He took his BS Architecture and Master of Tropical Landscape Architecture program from the same institution. Presently, he is involved in research about native trees, yay, and urban greening. Friends, let's all welcome Architect Patrick Andrew Gozon.
Magandang hapon po.
Magandang hapon.
Okay, ngayon po, I'll give you siguro the point of view dito sa ating built environment, no, sa isang designer's point of view. Like me po, I'm an architect. I teach in the College of Architecture, and today I'm going to give you insights on Philippine natives versus the non-native trees in urban greening. Usually when I give this particular talk, I ask the audience kung ano po kung kilala nila yung puno. Pero since ngayon po, hindi yata tayo ako na yung mag-i-introduce kung ano po yung mga puno na papakita ko sa inyo. No? Tulad nito, ito po yung acacia. No? Ito yung nakikita niyo nakikita niyo palagi sa UP po na nagpapaganda ng University Academic Oval. No? Na pag dumadaan kayo, underneath it is medyo maganda sa inyo na nakapag-jogging kayo, no? Tapos napaka-cozy ng dating, no? Usually I ask po kung alam niyo kung acacia is native or not. It's not, no? Dahil galing po siya sa South America. Another tree na madalas natin nakikita sa landscapes ng Pilipinas is itong mangga, no? Yung mango, you see it a lot in the countrysides, and of course you buy the fruit a lot, no? And most of the time we claim it as our own, but it's not a native tree. It is a tree coming from India. Kaya lang dahil sa tagal na po siya nakarating dito sa Pilipinas, nag-naturalize na siya at naging common na siya sa mga landscapes, lalong-lalo na dito sa Metro Manila, no? Ito naman po ang duhat, no? Siguro minsan sa sobrang ano nito, na kalat sa buong Metro Manila, we take it for granted, no, na pag nahuhulog na lang minsan yung fruit tapos hindi na natin pinupulot, no, pero actually ang sarap sana pag ano to, pag kinukuha natin yung fruit tapos nilagay natin sa isang mangkok tapos siguro sprinkle it with a few salt particles tapos kakalugin, no. Pwede na yan habang nanonood ng TV, no, ninangatan natin habang to pass off the time. Tapos ang sarap pa na snack, no? It's a refreshing snack for us. Another tree which we have a lot in Metro Manila is this, no? Ito yung tinatawag nilang mahogany. Usually it is associated with what you call a Philippine mahogany, but it's not actually the Philippine mahogany. Ang Philippine mahogany natin are usually associated with the dipterocarp trees. Yun yung mga ginagamit at binibili niyo sa hardware na tinatawag dati na mga tangile, mga apitong, no? Ang mahogany is actually an introduced tree na ginagamit ngayon for reforestation. Sadly, pag noong mga 1930s up to the 1970s, ang dami na introduced nito, lalo na sa mga countryside, that you see a lot of empty lots na ito yung pinatubo nila to the point na meron din tayo yung tinatawag na artificial forest sa Bohol na gandang-ganda tayo pag pupunta doon kasi monocrop. Ito po yung nakaano doon. But that artificial forest is now called a dead forest. Like kasi sabi nila, wala daw makatubo in between some of the ano to. Kasi nga, sadly, kasi nga po it's a non-native tree, no? Actually galing siya South America na pero ginagamit na madalas dito sa landscapes natin kasi madali natin mapapatubo at madali ring i-maintain at maparami, no? Some other trees na nakikita natin all around Metro Manila, yung calachuchi po, no? Sabi nila hindi raw maganda gamitin sa bahay pero pinatutubo natin. Like, kasi nga may connotation siya na usually pinapatubo siya sa mga sementeryo, no? Pero ginagamit pa rin for landscapes, no? Yung ating sampalok na ginagamit sa sa sinigang. Napakasarap po, no? Pero hindi rin po siya native. Matagal na siyang dinala dito ng mga Malay, no? Galing sa mga Arab countries. And eventually, it trickled down to our culture na pinapatubo na natin at naging naturalized na dito sa Pilipinas. Makopa, favorite ng mga ng mga Chinese na patubuin sa bahay nila kasi hindi raw dumadaan dun sa pagiging maasim. Matabang siya, biglang tumatamis, tapos pula pa yung kulay. So favorite siya na pwede daw ilagay sa harap ng bahay. Another one is yung Chico, no? Napakagandang puno, honestly. Pero may superstition to dahil itim yung kanyang buto. Medyo hindi raw maganda na tumubo siyang mas mataas pa sa height ng bahay. Kasi daw, pag tumaas siya sa mas mataas pa sa bahay, meron daw mamamatay dun sa household. And we have a lot of other trees, like for example, yung longka, yung star apple, no? Papaya, your guava, your atis. Halos lahat ng mga kilala natin, no? Again, these are not all natives, no? So most trees na nakikita natin all around Metro Manila are actually non-native but are exotic trees, no? So just to make the definition, no, the distinction between what I'm discussing, no, a native tree is a native plant species in any particular area of interest are those which arrive and establish and survive there without the direct or indirect human assistance, no. So for example, meron kayong isang halaman, dinala galing sa Hong Kong, dinala niyo dito, tumubo dito, yun po, hindi siya native, that is exotic, kasi may tulong natin ng tao para dumating dito. Incidentally, for example, that you came from another land, sa Thailand, tapos napunta siya sa shoes niyo, yung isang seed tapos tumubo dito, no? Kaya minsan pag sa airport, 'di ba, ang daming checks because we wouldn't want actually a non-native species or a pest, no, na kumabit sa atin para mag-wreak ng havoc dito sa ating environment, no? So then you have also what you call an indigenous and endemic. Yung indigenous is native to one place but could also be native to other localities. Ibig sabihin, pwedeng indigenous siya sa Pilipinas pero nakikita din siya sa Thailand or nakikita din siya sa Malaysia or even as far as India. Tulad for example nung native nating Nara, native siya dito sa Pilipinas, but it could be seen as far as India, no? Pero meron tayong tinatawag na endemic species, no? These are native to a certain locality and could not be found native in other areas, no? For example, endemic siya sa Pilipinas, hindi siya makikita sa Thailand, hindi siya makikita sa India, hindi siya makikita sa Malaysia, or hindi siya makikita sa Borneo, no? Incidentally, meron pang mas masalimuot. Pwedeng mas endemic siya specific to smaller localities. Like for example, pag sinabi kong endemic sa Luzon, endemic na siya sa Pilipinas, pero endemic sa Luzon, hindi mo siya makikita sa Visayas at hindi mo siya makikita sa Mindanao. Pero pag sinabi ko pa, for example, that it is endemic, tulad may isang puno, yung tinatawag nilang Philippine teak. Nakikita lang siya sa isang puno na, there are only about 65 trees that are existing, no? Right now as wild. Nandun lang siya sa San Juan, Batangas, saka sa isang island off papuntang Mindoro. So endemic lang siya doon. So pag nawala siya doon sa particular na locality na yon, wala na siya forever, no? Kaya there is actually a need for us to conserve kung ano yung tinatawag nating mga native species natin. No? Okay, kanina nag-uusap po kayo tungkol dun sa carrying capacities. No? Ito po ang itsura ng Quezon City. Actually, the Metro Manila with Quezon City in the center. Nakikita niyo yung Diliman, nakikita niyo yung Quezon Memorial. No? Tapos nakikita niyo yung UP na siya lang actually yung medyo mas parang island of green doon, no? Sa sea na puro gray, no? Tapos tignan mo, halos konti lang yung patches ng green na nakikita niyo, no? Itong maliit na green dito is actually yung Camp Aguinaldo, no? Siya lang yung medyo green doon sa sea of gray na nakikita niyo. Pero kung i-move lang natin ng konti, ito yung katabi. Nakikita niyo yung label ng Antipolo. Nakikita niyo yung label ng Antipolo dito. That is how green, no, the adjacent areas of Metro Manila are, no? So, tingnan niyo yung comparison of how green it is, no? Incidentally, they were saying that when the Spaniards came here to the Philippines, we are about 99% covered with greenery, yung ating from coast to coast, no? So you'll encounter landscapes supposedly that look like this or probably mas mahitik pa, no? Forest formations that are from what I hear from the other colleagues from the bio department, they would say that there are about 11 or 13 yata na forest formations within the Philippines. But right now, ganito na itsura ng Metro Manila, no? Konti na lang yung puno, konti na lang yung tinatawag nating urban greens, no? So, just to give you an idea of how siguro na nade-deplete yung greenery, no, sa atin, no. I got this from one website, yung sa Pandayan Bookshop. Pinakita nila kung anong itsura ng isang place dito sa Region 4A noong 1984 to about 2024. Ang laki ng difference nung nawawala na green, di ba? So Metro Manila is in dire need of urban greening. No? I've seen a lot of definitions, no, for urban green space, but ito yung pinaka parang sensible na nakita ko, which I got from sa isang website sa ano to. So there should be openness, there should be public accessibility, and ang pinakamalaking part niyan, no, when you talk about urban green space, dapat merong green cover. Pero why is it essential to use trees for urban greening over other greening methods, no? Like for example, ito pag tinignan mo sa ibabaw, no? When you look at it in Google Earth, green pa rin siya. Pero ganyan ang itsura niya, no? Puro grass, then probably it's not as usable and as public accessible para gamitin, no? For you siguro to perform activities. Kung gusto niyo mag-picnic or ano, hindi niyo magagawa ng maganda, no? As opposed to something like this na lawn, no? Pero ang problema pagdating ng lawn is pagdating ng hapon, tanghali, no? 12 noon, hindi niyo siya nagagamit. I've seen playgrounds that pagdating ng 12 noon, pagdating ng actually as early as 9 o'clock, pagdating ng 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, 12 noon, hanggang pagdating ng mga alas 3 ng hapon, they are rendered useless kasi sobrang init ng playground. Makikita mo lang yung tao pagdating na ng 4 o'clock, tsaka ng 5 o'clock, which is paggabi na, no? Kasi nga, yun yung medyo tolerable yung temperature, no? So, the best way for you to establish urban greening para magamit ng tao, for more people to be accessible to it, no? Remember, it has to have public access, is for you to make use of the trees, no? You've seen things like these over the internet, no? That when you enjoy the space, ang pinaka magandang enjoy it is of course kung saan ka pinaka-komportable. Then the past few months, we've experienced things like these, no? Tapos nakikita natin to nakapost sa Facebook. Tapos nag-agree lang tayo, no? But we measured the temperature, no? For example, no? That you establish an area with trees. Tapos kung walang trees, tapos meron direct sun exposure, you get as much as 40 to 49 degrees Celsius and continuously rising, especially if we slowly cook under the direct sun exposure. So kung walang puno, puro grass lang siya, mainit pa rin, di ba? Kasi meron kang direct sun exposure, no? But when you have yung trees, either pwedeng yung exotic or yung native trees with no distinction, no? They have better thermal comfort, no? So there's more preference and more accessibility to use the space. The temperature kasi would reach 29 to 36 degrees, no? Much lower than sa 40 to 49 na na-experience kung wala yung puno, no? So the tree benefits a lot, no? Because of its shade. And because of the shade, yung tree, yung quality ng space na nagagawa niya underneath, no, makes it possible, no, for the space to be useful even at the harshest summer midday heat. So if you look at what particular reasons kung bakit gagamit ka ng native or not, no, the most foremost of course is this, no, kung bakit native ang gagamitin, no. In recent years, yung Philippines, it has experienced an onslaught of increasingly wind-strong super typhoons. Sabi nila, napakaswerte nga natin. Mainit na, pero nagkakaroon pa tayo ng mga super typhoons pagdating naman ng ano to, no? As strong as sometimes 260 to 270 kilometers per hour, no? Ang ano to, ang wind velocity, no? So, kung meron kayo nung ganyan landscape, mas-shock yung landscape nyo, no? So, what will happen is that after ng typhoon, pwede silang tumumba, ma-damage, no? So, just imagine, meron ng destruction yung typhoon itself, pero pag natapos at naapektuhan yung landscape sa Metro Manila, tumumba yung mga puno, meron pa siya mga after effect, of course, of mas nagiging open yung particular space dun sa direct sun exposure. So, mas lasting yung damage na ginagawa ng isang typhoon, no? So, this is a heritage park in 2006. Yung typhoon is Milenio, no? Makikita nyo to, that's Acacia auricoliformis. Itong nasa tabi, that is Acacia, yung Samanea-saman, no? Halos lahat ng mga puno tumumba kasi alam niyo naman ng Memorial Park, it's open, no? Kaya medyo hindi protected yung mga trees from the onslaught of the strong winds. Pero may mga particular streets na pinatubuan nila ng Nara, ng Molave, ng Pili, ng even yung tinatawag nilang Bagras. Lahat sila nakatayo after nung bagyo, no? Pero most of the non-native trees, ang auricoliformis, I think they are from Australia, no? Then of course, South America yung acacia, no? So, sila yung tumumba after nun, no? So, pag tumumba yung puno, mainit na kagad yung area, no? So, depleted na kagad yung quality of the space. Well, when you make use of natives, yung iba sa kanila tumba din, nadadamage, pero mas resilient sila. So, for example, itong resort na to, no, it's called Amarella, tinamaan siya ng Odette. But after 3 months, ito yung itsura niya nung Odette. After 3 months, naka-recover na kagad yung landscape, no? Maybe not as you've seen before nung ano to, pero nag-recover siya. Pag tumumba yung puno, that's 0% kagad yung usage of the space. While, for example, kung na-damage lang siya, natanggal yung parts of the canopy, mag-regenerate siya, and after 6 months, it could get to as much, of course, to close to 100% of the usage of the space. And there's also what you call placemaking, no? So how space is used and experienced by its users, no? So pag native, pwede mong i-immerse yourself in revel in nature, no? Pwede kang mag-experience ng mga flowers, no? Pwede mo enjoy yung mga fruits. Pwede mo rin enjoy, of course, yung entailing na mga biodiversity, no, that comes along with introducing, no, yung different native species, no. Ganun din naman sa exotic plant species, no, but there is this thing kasi that you don't know kung ano yung epekto ng isang exotic plant until after how many years that you've seen it growing in an area, no? You've seen stories like, for example, ito, no? Stop planting mahoganies because sabi nila, it's a dead forest. Pinapatay daw niya, may alelopathy. Pinapatay niya yung mga tumutubo sa ilalim niya. Then, sabi nila, ito, no, yung African tulip daw, nakapekto sa bee species, no? And like for example, ang Hawaii nagtanim tinanggal nila yung mga in some areas of the island, tinanggal nila yung mga native species nila, tapos pinalitan nila ng exotic, no? Okay naman yung naging environment daw, but you still hear about news, no, that every year 23 species have been lost in the island, yung mga ganun tipo. So, if you make use of the exotics, hindi sila natural selection, no? Nadi-discover, ngayon pa lang natetest kung ano yung nagiging effect niya doon sa environment. no? Okay, so you should use natives. Pero ano ba itong mga natives na to, no? Just usually, ang dami kasi ito, so dadaanan ko lang ng madali, no? Meron kayo yung Nara, meron kayong tinatawag na Banaba, meron yung Dapdap, Molave, Mabolo, Nyog. For foliage trees, meron kayong Balitbitan, Antipolo, Botong, Talisay, Nyog-Nyogan, Bitaog. May Binunga. If you're talking about flowers, meron kayong Dita, merong Malabulak, may Bagawak Morado, may Mambog, may Batino, Mangkono, may Katmon, Balinghasay, Banay-Banay, Lumbang, Bangkal, Malubago, Paraybay, Pandakaki. And yung much celebrated ngayon in most of the landscapers, ano to, sa Limbobog. Merong Paguringon. Then we also have fruit and produce trees. Merong mga Kapulasan, Marang, Samuyaw, Batuan, Tabon-Tabon, Lipote, Pili, Bignay, Bago, no? Alocon. And some other interesting trees. Meron Supa, Dao, Lamyo, Amugis, Kalantas, Bani, Kalumpang, Bagras, Philippine Teak, Sambong, Alibambang, Benguet Pine, no? Kalumpit, Mamales, Ayangile, Alagaw, Bangkoro, Agoho, Toog, Banilad. Then yung mga palm, most of the palms are the ones that are in demand in urban greening because of the aesthetic value of it. Meron Takipan, may bunganganga, may bungang China. Yung mga false yucca, no? Malasambal, Anahaw, Buri, Pitogo, at marami pang iba. There are about 3,600 plus species of Philippine native trees, no? Pero kalimitan ng tinatanim natin are the ones that we are familiar with here in Metro Manila, no? Yun nga yung mention ko kanina, no? But there are 3,600 species that you could choose from, no? Yung kaninang mention ko, baka that is less than 100, no? If you think about 3,600 species, that's if you want to actually learn about Philippine native trees, one per day, no? It would take you 10 years to finish all 3,600 species. Ganun kadami sila. So kung gagawa kayo ng pananaliksik tungkol sa mga Philippine native trees, there is actually a deep chest where you could actually get the information, no? Mas marami kayong pwedeng gawin, no? So what you could do, you could join organizations and societies and community groups to meet new friends and learn together about these particular trees. We are talking about kanina ng placemaking. No? There is no other way for you to learn about these trees apart from, of course, immersing yourself and learning about them in their natural environment. So ang pinakamaganda siguro if you could join also what we call yung mga activities na ginagawa ng NGOs. Ito actually maganda yung ginagawa ng Green Convergence that you're having lectures. But apart from the lectures, you could join immersion trips. You could go to areas and learn about the trees. Or you could join, like for example, in UP, we're having a lot of tree walks na sabi nila. No? So pupuntahan isa-isa yung mga puno kung saan sila tumutubo within UP. Then you get immersed and introduced to these particular trees that are already there and are actually proven that are okay for urban greening. Okay? So thank you very much for listening.
And of course, siyempre,
Iba
yung
talaga pag
convergence,
native trees, yes.
Meron tayong mga books, no, about
Yes,
native trees na
it's a Green Convergence project, Philippine native trees up close and personal. We are now working on book
yeah.
404. That's the fourth edition. That's the fourth, what, uh, uh, fourth book. we published 3 books and we have reprinted some of them. So yeah.
We're actually going into a very interesting discussion. We present the idea of carrying capacity, and I think we answered the question of has Metro Manila reached its carrying capacity? Then we go to what are some of the solutions towards making it a more livable space for the people living in Metro Manila. And now let's go to our reactor for today for this topic. He is from the Housing and Home Site Regulation Officer 3 of the Department of Human Settlement and Urban Development. Let's welcome Sir Ronnie James R. Casamayor for the reaction.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon po. Can you hear me po?
Yes, we
po,
can.
loud and clear.
Ayan. First of all, we would like to thank your organization for inviting us to attend and provide our reactions sa tatlong presentations. I have also with me Ms. Hailey Mariel Sigui. So we are tasked to provide comments and reactions sa presentations ng mga esteemed research speakers. So to start, balikan natin yung unang presentation kanina ni Mr. Rene Pineda. Personally, I have to agree with Mr. Pineda na merong agawang nagaganap sa resources natin, no, dahil nga sa rapid increase ng population. As I was saying, yun nga, in relation dun sa water shortage natin ng 2019, no, so dahil sobrang dami ng mga consumers sa Metro Manila, hindi lang mga households, pati mga establishments and yan, golf courses. Ayan, nagkaroon ng shortage. And or for example, meron ding instance na pwedeng magamit yung ating mga ilog at dagat sa food or fish production, no? Dahil nagkakaroon ng mga reclamation projects, so nababawasan yung mga water areas dito sa Metro Manila. So in relation naman sa field namin, no, sa land use planning or urban planning, as rapid urbanization is related to conflicting land uses din. So na-mention ko kanina yung mga golf courses, commercial establishments such as malls and grocery stores. So pwede nilang maagawan yung other land uses ng space, no? So it is very important na magkaroon ng or mag-formulate ang mga local government units ng comprehensive land use plans and implement it through the zoning ordinances. So yun nga, because we have to acknowledge the fact na we need to properly allocate, develop, manage, and utilize our resources, both land and water resources. So as part of the solution or strategy, the Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development has rolled out last February 2024 the Planado program, which aims for 0 CLUP backlogs by year 2028. So at the present, no, dito sa Metro Manila, 8 LGUs ang merong updated na comprehensive land use plan and zoning ordinances. And meron namang 9 na for updating na. And as of now, nagpo-provide ang department ng technical assistance para matulungan silang ma-formulate yung kanilang land use plans. And ayun, nabanggit din ni Mr. Rene na yung experience din sa ibang bansa, yung Chongnyecheon River, no, na ginawang expressway tapos binalik ulit ng South Korea sa original na state nito, which is river nga. So dito sa Pilipinas, yun, nabanggit din ni Sir yung plano na magkaroon din ng highway sa ibabaw ng Pasig River. Pero as of early this year, ang pagkakaalala ko, yung proponent ng project na yon ay drain up na yung project. So hindi pa siya, kumbaga, nai-implement, hindi pa siya naitutuloy. On the other hand, yung Department of Human Settlements and Urban Development ay nag-implement ng Pasig River Rehabilitation Project, no, which aims to transform the river into a center of tourism and economic activity. So, kung mababalitaan nyo yung mga posts na parang linear park siya sa malapit sa Manila Post Office. So, yun yung isa sa mga projects na yun ng department. And also, hindi lang siya for beautification o aesthetics, no? Isa rin siya, gusto rin nitong i-utilize yung road and water transport to improve yung urban mobility dito sa Metro Manila, since ang target nito ay yung buong kahabaan ng Pasig River. And so yun, planong pahabain yung green corridors along the Pasig River. And yun, in relation sa dito sa project naman sa infrastructure project sa Seoul, no, what can we do here in Metro Manila? Yung slide na to ni Sir Rene din ay napukaw din yung attention ko, since yun nga, banggit niya na importante ang political will ng ating mga local chief executives pagdating sa pag-ensure ng prioritization of developing open and green spaces. No, so, base nga sa mga pag-aaral, meron itong economic, social, health, environmental benefits, no, na makakatulong sa mga citizens ng Metro Manila. So yun nga, 5 square meters per capita lang ang available for the citizens, and which is almost half ng World Health Organization standard, which is 9 square meters. So na-highlight yung need ng mga tao pagdating sa public open and green spaces nung pandemic, lalong-lalo na kasi kailangan nating mapigilan yung pag-spread ng virus through social distancing. And ayun, kasama sa mga projects ng department ay magkaroon ng inventory ng idle lands na maaaring magamit hindi lang para mag-develop ng mga housing and infrastructure projects, but also to establish open and green spaces. And also, isa sa mga proposed project namin sa DBM na ngayon ay for their approval ay yung development nga ng network of open green spaces and public parks project. So yun. Sa pangatlong presentation naman, very comprehensive yung naging discussion ni Professor Golon, no, pagdating sa mga puno na makikita natin commonly dito sa bansa. And siguro kailangan natin magkaroon ng part 2 para dito, para ma-discuss yung na mas ma-elaborate pa yung discussion on vegetation and forest cover at may relate siya sa carrying capacity issue ng National Capital Region. So we understand naman na due to time constraint siguro kaya maraming hindi pa na-discuss, no, pagdating sa carrying capacity. And gusto ko lang ding ma-reiterate na yung LGUs ay kailangang magkaroon ng strong partnership with the concerned national government agencies, civil society organizations, non-government organizations, professionals such as landscape architects, and even private entities, no, to build more spaces that are accessible to the public. Dito sa Metro Manila, pwede natin i-adopt yung best practices, not necessarily from abroad, kasi meron naman tayong mga success story nga ng pag-establish ng green and open spaces. Isa na dito yung Iloilo Esplanade, no? So pwede natin i-adapt yun if applicable sa setting natin dito sa Metro Manila. So yun lang naman yung personal take ko doon. And thank you.
Thank you, Sir Ronnie, for that reaction. So napakadami pang kailangan gawin.